It's really a life-threatening experience when you meet such a sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is a very superstitious person and has been superstitious about folk remedies recently. She said that taking bee eggs could keep her figure tight, so she showed off to me proudly, and it became tighter and tighter, and even regained her first feeling. I told her that she may have depression. In the early stage, the lower body is just tightened, but in the late stage, the legs will be completely bonded, like a mermaid. My sister-in-law was frightened after hearing this, so she stopped using bee eggs and recovered her health. But later my brother thought she couldn't give birth to a son, so he found a female college student outside. My sister-in-law is a yellow-faced woman. My brother said she is a hen that doesn't lay eggs, and she is old and yellow. My sister-in-law was so angry that she pushed me down the 18th floor in anger. It's all my fault that I can't get married and I'm jealous of her having a husband. I was thrown to death on my head to the ground. After my death, I was very resentful. Seeing my sister-in-law caring for the female college student to have confinement, the family was harmonious, I was reborn. I returned to the day I took my sister-in-law to have a physical examination. The radio sounded suddenly in my ears, and in front of me was the hospital outpatient hall where people came and went. My scalp tingled and I realized that I might be reborn. My mother pushed me hard and said, "Zhang Xiang, why are you stunned? Get the report and leave. Why do you have to come to a bad place like the hospital for no reason? If you have money, leave it to your nephew." I went to the self-service printer to get my sister-in-law's physical examination report. In my previous life, my mother was a person who was deeply superstitious about folk remedies. My sister-in-law has been married for 5 years, and her belly has not moved yet, so my mother gave her all kinds of strange folk remedies: the placenta of the mother, the pickled pomegranate, the incense ash. I was stuck in my sister-in-law's mouth. Although my sister-in-law complained, she suffered from having no children and lacked confidence, so she endured it silently. My mother heard about wasp eggs from somewhere, and said that eating them would bring more children and good fortune, so she gave her sister-in-law the wasp eggs that she had been for 3 months. Compared with other folk remedies, wasp eggs are deeply loved by my sister-in-law. She proudly showed off to me, "Xiang, you don't know that the wasp egg has eaten, and your lower body is getting tighter and tighter. Your brother likes it so much, but occasionally his stomach feels a little uncomfortable, so it should be fine." After hearing this, I suspected that she was suffering from depression. As a medical student, I was worried that my sister-in-law would have physical problems and insisted on taking her for a physical examination. Like in my previous life, my sister-in-law's report showed that someone was suspected of having depression and needed further examination. I decisively gave the report to my sister-in-law and also gave her some popular science on the late stage of mermaid disease. Not only did my legs close, but I also had life risks. My sister-in-law was frightened and stopped using bee eggs. Not long after, my sister-in-law recovered her health. But my brother disliked her and hooked up with a young and beautiful female college student outside. My sister-in-law couldn't compete with the female college student, and in anger, she pushed me off the 18th floor. Thinking of the tragic situation of brain fracture in my previous life, I clenched the report in my hand and said that I could never be a bad person no matter what I said in my life. But now the note of rebirth is actually a medical examination in the hospital, and it is too late to regret it. The most urgent task is how to deal with the report in hand. My mother snatched the report irritably and glanced at me, "Zhang Xiang, you made it with money. It's amazing to read some books. Is it? You actually doubt your mother's prescription? I want to see what the report says." My mother screamed. I clenched my fists and had to lie to mess with whatever I said. Unexpectedly, my mother jumped up the next second, "Mermaid. Mermaid is good too. This is a good sign. You can have more children and more blessings." My mother looked excited and thought that this result slapped me in the face, and mocked me proudly, "What am I saying? I dare not speak anymore, right?" In the last life, my mother wanted to hold her grandson, but she had been holding a grudge against her sister-in-law Chang Ruming for a long time. My mother is a boyish person, so I feel quite sympathetic to Chang Ruming's situation. In my last life, I was killed by my sister-in-law. Unexpectedly, my mother not only did not hold Chang Ruming responsible, but instead made up a reason to say that I was under great pressure from the building because of my doctoral thesis. She not only used my death to ask the school for compensation, but also forgave Chang Ruming, and let her be a mistress and kill my murderer. Not only did they not hold her accountable, they actually let her live at home with peace of mind. I understand that I just have an ATM at home and there is no slight affection at all. At this time, Chang Ruming came back from outside to buy food for my mother, and when she heard the result, she came over. My mother proudly patted the report on her and said proudly, "What am I saying? Wasp eggs have miraculous effects, right? Look at this, isn't it? Mermaid. Chang Rumming glanced at me with a hint of hesitation on her face. Although she has been in junior college for several years, Chang Rumming must not know about the rare disease like a mermaid. Chang Rumming, Xiang, what disease is this? My mother's face suddenly turned dark. What are you saying? This is not a disease? This is a great blessing. This is a good sign of having more children and more blessings. You are sincerely causing trouble for me. Do you still dare to suspect that I am harming yourself? If you don't want to eat, don't eat it. It's really a good intention but no good reward. Chang Rumming was most afraid that my mother would be angry. She had offended her as she had come to the examination for me. Now that the report has been made, it seems that nothing is serious. Seeing that I agree, she nodded. She immediately put down her hesitation and held my mother's arm to comfort her. Mom, how can I not believe you? Isn't this all Xiang insisted on bringing me? I thought that she had come, so I checked it by the way. Fragrance. You are really, what bad intentions can Mom have? I have all experienced the effect of eating this wasp egg. You will be sewed. Our mother and daughter relationship. I glanced at her with complicated eyes. Chang Rumming really turned against him. Last time I pushed me downstairs, my mother didn't even say anything, so she rushed to put shit on my head. But this result is exactly what I like. He deserves to enjoy this blessing in this life. I lowered my head to apologize to my mom. My mother looked resentful. My sister-in-law simply threw the report to the trash can. Hand over to eat quickly. On the way home, seeing my mother still having a cold face, Chang Rumming took the initiative to say that she would increase the dosage, from 1 bowl a day to 3 bowls a meal. My mother's expression softened, and she muttered dissatisfiedly, if you add it, do you want to add it, don't you have any money? The wasp eggs my mother gave me need to be swallowed raw. Chang Rumming's reward is so big. For a moment, I wanted to see how Chang Rumming's legs were closed, so how could she give birth to a child? When I got home that night, there was even more noise from my brother and sister-in-law's room. My mother said that she thought it was expensive, so she made 3 big bowls of hornet pills for Chang Rumming to eat raw. Chang Rumming's cry seemed to be the best reward for her mother. My parents stood at the door of my brother and sister-in-law's room and muttered, "Oh, it seems that my son is very satisfied. Work harder, son. I've hit him several times at a time." My dad asked inexplicably, "How many more can you do at a time?" My mother said angrily, "You know what's the point. Do mermaids understand?" Several of them are considered small. The 2 of them were still listening to the bedside muttering in the middle of the night. When I woke up the next day, my sister-in-law was really radiant and she seemed to have been soaked in honey. Seeing that I had prepared breakfast, he completely forgot about the fact that I was stabbed yesterday. I greeted him, and he looked at me in disgust. "Why did you make these for breakfast? This green vegetables and white porridge looks like you have no appetite." Chang Rumming was disliked by my mother and made breakfast, and it was all her work. I saw that the whole family didn't get up today, so I did some at least. But I didn't expect that Chang Rumming had just regained my mother's favor and began to point out to me. I held back my temper and said, "Sister-in-law, you will eat something. You are so hard." "Mom, I will definitely reward you tonight and make delicious food for you." Chang Rumming raised her head and said to me condescendingly, I said, Xiang, you are 30 after studying for a doctorate. Why is it so rough to cook? How can you get married like this? You might as well stay at home and not marry anymore." In the last life, Chang Rumming had no children for many years and had a very low status in this family. Only I sympathized with her, and she subconsciously brought me as an ally. As soon as she was favored in this life, she took up the posture of her master and was anxious to chase people away. I was not in a hurry, and said according to her words, "Sister-in-law, you know how difficult it is to find a partner after studying for a doctorate, and I am not as good as my sister-in-law. You are so beautiful and virtuous, so you can only make do with it and take your time." Chang Rumming calmed down her expression and her eyes turned, "Thank you for this. My mother gives me this kind of delicious food and that kind of delicious food all day long, and it doesn't work if I don't think it's beautiful." Xiang, you mean that this wasp egg is indeed effective, right? I don't know what to say. Sister-in-law, your belly is hopeful of the whole family, it's time to treat you well. Xiang, are you envious? Do you want to try it with me? The bowl in my hand almost fell off. The dense wasp eggs were extremely disgusting. Who would eat this ghost thing? Thinking of this in my heart, I still smiled and said, "Okay, sister-in-law, I wanted to taste it, but my mother couldn't bear to say anything. It's better for my sister-in-law to be nice to me." Unexpectedly, Chang Ruming's face changed and suddenly broke out. Okay, Zhang Xiang, I knew you were just jealous of me. You deliberately provoked my relationship with my mother. You even took me to the hospital. You were all because your mother was biased and didn't give you wasp eggs. I kindly took her to the physical examination, but she didn't expect this to be my trick to compete for favor. As expected, no bad peach blossoms can do it all. Sister-in-law, I haven't finished speaking yet. Chang Ruming stood up and splashed me with a porridge, saying, you nerd. You are just afraid that I will get pregnant and are jealous of my wasp eggs. Don't think about it. Even if I have it, I won't give it to you. Sooner or later, I will let you get out of this house. I inhale and then inhale again. Chang Ruming turned over with one move and actually threw porridge into me. According to her personality, she probably had to suffer. But according to his obsession with wasp eggs, I guess she won't be able to jump for long. Sure enough, as if I was afraid that I would steal her favor, Chang Ruming acted coquettishly at my mother for a while, and really convinced my mother to pour the wasp eggs into the bathtub and take the wasp egg bath. Don't ask me why I know, because I poured the bath water. My mother was very satisfied with Chang Ruming's obedience. She seemed to see the hope of holding a grandson, and asked me to serve Chang Ruming. I usually give all the work she does. Several black pots and wasp eggs fell down, and the drains were all black. Some of the eggs seemed to be hatching, and the black eggs had already begun to wriggle. The scene almost spit out my supper, and I don't know how Chang Ruming could take a shower in such a disgusting thing. In this way, with 9 bowls of wasp eggs and a wasp egg bath, Chang Ruming was refreshed. My brother is a project worker. He used to not go home on the grounds that the construction site was busy. Now he goes home every month in a row, which makes Chang Ruming feel so proud that he walks around at home. Only I can tell that the cat steps are too much. It is caused by the hormone disorder in Chang Ruming's body and the aggravation of the condition. Now she can walk with her legs spread and twisted. Not long after, her gait will become slower and more bulky, and the tearing feeling of her legs will become more and more painful until her lower leg is completely closed. Chang Ruming seemed not to notice the slow changes in her body. She enjoyed the service of me and my mother during the day, lay on the bed at night, and tossed with my brother every night. My parents are the same. I guarded at the door of the room and listened to the bed every night. That day, when my sister-in-law called out in a happy mood, my mother seemed to get tired of hearing it and frowned. Calling, what's the use of calling lightly? The rooster crows, and the hen lays the eggs. He saw that my dad looked intoxicated and was about to beat him up. Oh, a few pig-like screams suddenly came from the room. What followed was my brother's loud insult. It's bad luck. I don't even say that I'm so dirty, that I'm so tired. Get out of here. Then there were 2 bangs, and my brother opened the door suddenly and left in a panic. I quickly got up and ate the melons. Looking through the crack in the door, Chang Ruming curled up on the bed, covering her swollen face, and sobbing in pain. There were a large piece of shocking blood on the bed. My mother hurried into the room, and Chang Ruming shivered in pain, and made a call for help. It hurts so much, Mom, I feel so painful. My mother looked disgusted and pinched her arm and twisted it. The useless thing is coming to my aunt. I just want to get pregnant. I wasted so many wasp eggs. I pinched tens of thousands of dollars a month, and I can't even let go of a fart. I feel embarrassed to cry out in pain. Chang Ruming was slapped by my brother first, and then pinched by my mother, and begged for mercy in tears. She shouted at the direction of my room, Xiang, I've shed a lot of blood. Take me to the hospital. My mother pinched her harder and couldn't resist the noise. I put on my clothes and left the house. Chang Ruming sat aside and cried in the living room. My dad shook his head and sighed. Only my mom was cursing with resentment. Chang Ruming is useless at all. No matter how good things are, you can't delay my son. Just leave as long as you should. Chang Ruming hugged my mother's legs and cried, Mom, don't worry, I will definitely give birth to a son. I will definitely give birth to a few big fat grandchildren for you. Don't drive me away. Mom, give me some more time, I will definitely be fine. My mother was unmoved. It's been 5 years, haven't you given time yet? You've ruined so many good things. Chang Ruming looked at me anxiously again. Xiang, you are a doctor. Do you think I can get pregnant? You must be fine, right? When I was in power, I wanted to bully me. The situation was wrong, so I changed my face and begged me. Chang Ruming's face changed so much that he was not burdened at all. I really didn't want to just let it go. If he and my brother divorced, maybe their lives will go smoothly in the future. How can I avenge my previous life? In this life, I have to let him taste the taste of life worse than death. After a few strokes, I walked up to my mother and helped her back to breathe, and whispered a few words in her ear. My mother suddenly realized and looked happy. It's almost 11 o'clock, he's going out in a panic. Chang Ruming's health is likely to be fine. She usually pays money and takes care of the whole family for physical examinations, but I still understand their health. As for my brother who had a child in his previous life, it was no problem, so it is a high probability that they could not get pregnant. If they delayed, there might be a miracle. No matter how bad it is, Chang Ruming can eat more disgusting things. We waited in the living room until 12 o'clock, and my mother came back with a happy face, holding a black thing as big as a fist in her hand. Song Zimaru, I don't know what material it was made of, and it looked quite heavy. My mother handed the Song Z pill to Chang Ruming and gave Chang Ruming an ultimatum. This requires 1 pill a day, take it orally, and you are not allowed to drink water. It is paired with wasp eggs. If it doesn't work for 2 months, you can get out. Chang Ruming nodded and didn't dare to ask why. When my mother left, she mustered up the courage to say to me, "Thank you, Xiang. What did you say to your mother? Why did she suddenly buy me medicine again?" I sneered coldly, "Why don't you call me a nerd?" What can I say? I told my mother that traditional Chinese medicine emphasizes harmony. During this period, there are too many wasp eggs. You can ask the master if he lacks the harmonization medicine. I don't believe that Master Dog will not earn money from the door. The result was as expected. I really brought back this shitty ball to my mother, but I wouldn't tell Chang Ruming about this. It would be better to leave it alone. After that day, Chang Ruming seemed to have become a different person. He was not angry at home and rushed to do housework. He drank the wasp eggs in big mouthfuls, and he ate the black and dirty balls one by one, wishing he could stuff them into his body. Every time he passes by me, there is an indescribable smell. In his previous life, he would have felt extremely sympathy when he looked miserable, but my sympathy had long been consumed by his two-faced swords. In this life, I just want to live well, study my doctoral thesis quickly, graduate early, and escape from this twisted family. Saved Chang Ruming's life and ruined him. After he rushed to do housework, I stayed in the internship hospital and did my graduation thesis with peace of mind. Until this day, when I entered the house, I saw that my parents and Chang Ruming were talking and laughing, and were still touching Chang Ruming's belly. Chang Ruming is actually pregnant. Seeing me coming back, Chang Ruming covered her mouth and smiled shyly. I haven't been there this month, and my stomach feels bloated, and I feel swollen when I walk. Xiang, you are about to be an aunt. Remember to save the betrothal gift for my nephew. I was confused. I had so many strange folk remedies, but I didn't expect to get pregnant with him, but I didn't show any joy on my face. Chang Ruming pulled me to touch her belly without hesitation. Xiang, please help me see if there are any twins? I feel like this belly is enough to hold it. Seeing that Chang Ruming's belly was indeed big and weird, it felt hard to touch, but it was a little fluid. I held her belly and pushed it back. No matter how she looked at her month, she didn't think that she was pregnant. Her big belly probably had too many follicles from the wasp, and her belly was not refluxed menstruation, which caused abdominal distension. Maybe I thought of the bee eggs breaking out. The nausea scene made my face turn pale. Seeing that my face was not good, Chang Ruming thought I was jealous of him. It's okay, Xiang, even if you really can't get married in the future, as long as you give all the money to your nephew, this is still your home, and you are the old lady. Your nephew can also send you off. I'm so laughing to death, I don't know if I can get married. But I was curious about how she gave birth to this son. After that day, Chang Ruming completely became the queen of the family, laying on the bed eating, drinking, and urinating and urging many people to serve. My mother's folk remedy is even more exciting. She studied folk remedies every day, saying that earthworms and hermaphrodites can be transformed into fetal bodies. In dilemma. My mother goes to the community downstairs to catch earthworms every day. The neighbors point fingers at my mother's weird behavior, but my mother doesn't care at all and is immersed in the fantasy of several grandchildren immediately. Not only did she dry earthworms at home, she also used the earthworm's mummy to make soup and fed it to Chang Ruming's mouth personally. The rotten smell of those earthworms covered up the smell of Chang Ruming's body. The menstrual period that could not be discharged returned to Chang Ruming's uterus. She was like an ant's scarf that she hadn't thrown for several months. She approached and smelled smelly and fishy. Soon, just 1 month later, his belly was almost stretched to the point of transparency. Under his high bulging belly, there was a red light. Looking closely, it seemed that black dots were squirming in the red liquid, growing wildly. And he didn't grow anywhere, but his belly grew fast, as if he was pregnant with a vampire and wanted to suck all his nutrients. Think about parasites' favorite things that corrode blood, which is not allowed to be thought about. These symptoms are obviously abnormal, but my mother was excited to think that Chang Rumeng was pregnant with multiple twins. Oh, my son is really capable. He won several of them this time. In my previous life, I might have advised them to go to the hospital for examination. At this time, I dare not talk too much. After all, my mother thinks the hospital is a bad place. He also said that the child is stingy, don't make a statement at this time, don't be known by others. Chang Rumeng regained favor for the second time, and believed in my mother without doubt, let alone the examination. Another month has passed, Chang Rumeng's legs have almost closed and have completely become bloated and weak. From a distance, his lower limbs are like a fish tail without vitality. As long as he moves his lower limbs a little, a disgusting smell will immediately come from between his legs. However, he was immersed in the illusion of being coaxed by everyone in his hand, and did not realize the problem at all. His parents only care about his growing belly and turned a blind eye to the rest of his physical condition. Not only did she even have to feed her food to her mouth, she didn't even go to the toilet, but she just pulled it with a diaper and asked my mother to change it. Occasionally when I go home, he will hurry up and call me. He forgot everything about saving him 2 months ago. When I mopped the floor, he was too lazy to lift his feet, and said, Shang's mother said, I was pregnant with multiple twins and couldn't walk and shake. What if my sons get hurt? Okay, sister-in-law, don't move, just lie in bed. Anyway, I want to go home, so it's just for my thesis to collect evidence. It doesn't matter whether you mop the floor or not. In my last life, my sister-in-law thought she had stopped using wasp eggs, so my brother cheated on the female college student. But in this life, even though he vomited when he ate wasp eggs, my brother still cheated on him. That day, I was in the obstetrics and gynecology department of the hospital and saw a female college student holding my brother came to check. Be good, baby, don't let mom work too hard, dad loves you. This gentle tone almost made me wonder if my irritable brother was scared by someone. Looking at the sound, I realized that the young woman with big belly was a female college student who shocked Chang Rumeng in her previous life. I was still shocked by my brother's ruthless scumbag, and I heard gossip from my colleagues in the hospital. I heard that a psychopath came from the outpatient clinic. The woman was almost in pain. She didn't have surgery at home. It seemed like she was a dream. She insisted on seeing her husband and asking her husband to watch him fight to death. The one in his belly didn't look like a child. I'm going. Chang Rumeng has been pregnant for only a few months. Why is she going to have a baby? Without caring about doubts, I quickly ran to the outpatient clinic and hid and watched the show. Chang Rumeng was lying on a stretcher, trembling all over, her lower limbs were almost bonded, and her belly was red and red. She kept shouting in pain, help, my stomach hurts so much, help, my son is coming out. My parents and several doctors held her tightly, and she broke her hands away. Chang Rumeng grabbed her stomach madly and shouted, I can't stand it anymore. It hurts so much. My son is about to rush out. Not only did she scratch her stomach and cut blood marks, but she even scratched her parents' faces covered in blood. But my mother didn't care about the injuries on her face at all and blocked Chang Rumeng's belly with her body. My grandson is only less than 5 months old, how could she have given birth so soon? Bear with it, don't catch it anymore, not only will you catch my grandson, I can't spare you. The medical staff pulled my mother apart and said, this patient has a serious abdominal infection and must undergo laparotomy immediately. Before the surgeon finished speaking, my mother was so anxious that she jumped, what? No surgery is allowed. Don't touch my grandson. Let's have a cesarean section now, will my grandson have premature birth? The doctor immediately explained to my mother, patient's family, please calm down. This lady doesn't look like she is pregnant, but she seems to be infected. She needs further examination. And you didn't find that there is only a gap between the woman's legs? In this way, she wants to have a baby. But my mother didn't listen at all, and she would just shout, no one is allowed to touch my grandson. I don't agree to a cesarean section. I must give birth naturally. Only children born naturally are smart. You must protect. Chang Rumeng's situation was imminent. The only gap between her legs had begun to flow out of suppurative blood. The smell of odor filled the entire clinic. Everyone around was ready to move, wanting to get close to eating melons, but they avoided the odor. Her stomach kept swelling, and she felt like she was about to break out of the shell in the next second. Seeing that my mother was so excited, the doctor had no choice but to ask Chang Rumeng's phone number. The phone call came over, and a familiar ringtone rang not far away. Everyone looked at the ringtone. My parents and Chang Ruming saw it. They saw my brother's hand, holding another woman with big belly. The air suddenly felt suffocated, and his eyes were facing each other. Chang Ruming's belly made a loud tear-like sound. The sound was sharp and harsh, like a sharp blade slashing through the air around it, and everyone present was shocked. Chang Ruming's belly broke on the spot, her eyes wide open, her eyes full of fear and confusion, as if she was staring at an indescribable horror scene. A disgusting black and brown liquid was surging like a flood, instantly soaking the bed sheets and dyeing the ground black. It's not just blood, but also like menstrual blood that has been corrupt for a long time, black and smelly. My mother fainted on the spot. In the flash of lightning, I asked the medical staff to put on protective clothing and then enter the operating room. Sure enough, as soon as Chang Ruming was pushed into the operating room, he heard all kinds of screams coming from inside. As the belly broke further, countless mutant wasps gushing out from it. The wings of these wasps are incomplete, some are still flapping the air desperately, trying to fly, some are crawling on the ground, looking for objects that can be attached. They were like evil ghosts crawling out of hell, crazily sucking the rotten flesh in Chang Ruming's uterus. The more and more insects were rushing, crawling all over the operating table, and everyone was confused for a moment, even the experienced professor was stunned. Some mutant wasps with wings flew out of Chang Ruming's belly and rushed towards the nearest attending doctor. Fortunately, the doctors took protective measures and no one was injured. In the spirit of humanism, the doctor performed surgery on Chang Ruming after disinfecting the mutant wasp on a large scale. But Chang Ruming's uterus had been eaten to less than half of it, and in order to stop the bleeding, it could only be removed. She will never have children again. Her legs were also completely closed, and she could only be excreted through the cannula like a fish. The doctor calmly explained the situation to the patient's family, but my mother yelled and refused to admit that Chang Ruming was not her grandson. She looked for the media everywhere to discredit the hospital, but the entire operation was clearly recorded. When records are made public, all the big guys in the medical world call it a medical miracle. But after seeing this, my mother still refused to admit it. She would rather believe that the hospital was fake and make endless fuss with her father, and she would hold banners at the hospital door every day. Until she suddenly remembered, isn't the mistress also carrying her belly? No one except me came to see Chang Ruming. Chang Ruming, who had been in a coma for 3 days, finally woke up. She slowly opened her eyes full of confusion. After finding her belly empty, she supported herself with difficulty, looking around, as if she was looking for something. Where is my son? Where? However, the doctor's answer was like a sharp knife, cutting off all her hopes and fantasies. Miss Chang, you are not pregnant, and your uterus has been removed during first aid, so it is impossible for you to have fertility. In addition, your legs are disabled. In order to maintain your normal excretion function, please be prepared for moderation. Chang Ruming's gaze finally stopped on her swollen legs. She tried to spread her legs apart, and the heart-wrenching tearing made her face distort. No, not true. Chang Ruming's face was like a wasteland covered in snow in winter, with a dead silence. She lost her former spirit and became empty and desperate. Her upper body trembled uncontrollably, and her hands unconsciously clenched their fists, allowing her nails to be deeply embedded in her palms. Chang Ruming teared her hair madly, tears gushed out like a fountain, and she completely collapsed. I took good care of Chang Ruming. I couldn't let her die. I also wanted to use her hand to take revenge on this family. This family of madmen prefers boys over girls, he looks at the ceiling all day long, his face is bloodless. I carefully cleaned her legs. Every day, I would reveal the recent situation of my mistress and my brother intentionally or unintentionally. Chang Ruming recuperated in the hospital for a whole month, and I was the only one to take care of him. With my careful care, her body improved slightly and she could move in a wheelchair. That day I saw that she was almost well, so I deliberately complained about the family in front of her. Oh, my parents and my brother are really heartless, especially my brother. When you were wearing your belly, he actually went to find other women to mess around. Now that you are like this, they actually abandon you. Oh, my poor sister-in-law, you are so miserable. Chang Ruming's face finally showed abnormal movements. I quickly continued, I dreamed of a boy with a formed belly. It's all my fault that I made you angry and gave birth prematurely. Tears began to flow out from the corners of Chang Ruming's eyes. Have your brother ever seen me? I held back my smile and pretended to be sad and said, no, sister-in-law, never once, and my parents have never been here. I deliberately said while peeling the apple. Chang Ruming's pale face began to turn red because of anger. She sat up straight with difficulty, staring at her belly with hatred in her eyes. I continued to add fuel to the fire. The mistress is going to give birth. Your brother used to be reluctant to let you spend a penny, but now he actually lets his mistress live in a VIP delivery room. There is only a fixed time to allow his family to go in. Your brother smokes on the rooftop before dawn every day before dawn. At that time, there was no one on the rooftop, and the railings there were repairs. I was really afraid that my brother would fall down accidentally. I deliberately slowed down the tone so that Chang Rumeng could hear it clearly. Her dull eyes lit up. Before leaving, I deliberately left the wheelchair and said, "Sister-in-law, although you can't walk now, you can still go anywhere in the wheelchair. I helped you change the wheels of the wheelchair. Now it's better to push. The impact is quite strong. Be careful not to hit someone." As I expected, at that moment, Chang Rumeng climbed into the wheelchair with all his strength. She came to the rooftop in a wheelchair. I was holding a telescope in the building opposite the hospital and watched her and my brother standing on the rooftop at the same time. This scene seems like a different world. The one who wants to kill this time is Chang Rumeng. But the damn person was replaced by the real culprit. My brother, like me in his previous life, was wandering leisurely on the rooftop without any preparation. I didn't notice the true love in the shadows. The resentful eyes of dreams are like a ghost seeking life. Like a cheetah ready to go in the dark night, he held the armrest of the wheelchair tightly with his hands, and the blue veins were exposed, as if it was the entity of his inner anger and hatred. The wheelchair progressed slowly at first, like the tranquility before the storm, and every step seemed to be exerting force. As the distance shortened, his wheelchair began to speed up until he was almost sprinting at my brother. At that moment, Chang Rumeng's eyes became extremely bright, a kind of light mixed with madness and determination. The corners of his mouth raised slightly, outlining a cold smile, which was like expectation for the coming revenge and a farewell to all the pain and humiliation of the past. With a deafening sound, Chang Rumeng used all her strength to push the wheelchair forward, and the wheelchair rushed forward like a wild horse that broke away from reins. He was angry and unwilling to accept it and crashed into my brother hard. The moment of collision, Chang Rumeng also integrated himself into this torrent of revenge. His eyes were even more firm, which was a kind of determination to pull the enemy into hell even if he destroyed himself. My brother turned back in horror, but only saw Chang Rumeng's twisted and determined face and his hatred eyes. At that moment, he might have understood something, but it was too late. My brother, the man who was once high and regarded as a treasure by everyone, was hit from the upstairs by Cheng Rue, a woman who seemed weak but actually decisive. At that moment, time seemed to freeze. True to the dream of dying together, he also wants to make this man who ruined his life pay the price. However, fate seemed to be a cruel joke. Chang Rumeng died on the spot, and my brother actually survived. However, although he saved his life, he became paraplegic at a high position and lost the ability to walk freely. He used to be so glorious that he became the waste in his family who had no dignity and could be despised at will. I found a nurse who was known for his viciousness and asked him to serve his brother well and let him experience the feeling of being disliked in every way. I only have hatred in my heart. I hate my brother for his irresponsibility to his family and his humiliation to women. My parents seemed to have grown up 10 years old overnight, their hair turned white, and their eyes were filled with despair and helplessness. They were so heartbroken that they could not speak when they watched their son, who was once proud of himself, become like this. My parents couldn't help but constantly pound their chests, using this method to vent their inner pain and self-blame. And at this moment, another bad news came: the mistress's child was born. This should be a turning point for our family, and it is the spark of rekindling hope. My parents still remained unchanged. They forced me to terminate my studies and go to work, and even sold myself to an old man to pay back the money to the mistress. These two ridiculous old men actually thought they could buy their grandson with money. They even put down their figure and kowtow to the mistress, begging him to leave the child for us. Their eyes were filled with prayers and desires, as if this child was their entire sustenance for the rest of their lives. However, the mistress just smiled contemptuously and told us a secret that shocked the whole family: this child is not your brother's at all. At that moment, the air seemed to solidify, and my parents' faces turned pale as paper. The mistress's words were like a sharp knife, piercing them into their hearts. Do you think that Sincerity Rumeng has not had a child for so many years, because of his problem? The words were full of sarcasm and ridicule. After hearing this, my mother squirted out an old blood, and she fainted in my dad's arms. At that moment, I seemed to see the last pillar of this house collapsed. Human nature reveals its most hideous side in front of me. Since then, this home that once deeply hurt me has finally completely disbanded. My brother is still lying on the bed, facing cold walls and endless loneliness every day. parents were immersed in the pain of losing their son and could not extricate themselves. And I will get revenge. After everything was over, I clearly recorded the process of suffering from depression as material for unpublished papers. This is not just a simple medical record, but also an opportunity for me to understand human nature. During the period when I finished my paper, I looked up the materials day and night and drew a chart of the changes in my condition. Hard work pays off, and academic papers were finally published, which caused a lot of sensation in the industry. At that moment, I deeply realized the true meaning of inspiration from life. But what makes me even more gratified is that through this experience, I learned to love others first. Observation of patients is not only external, but more importantly, their inner mental state. I began to realize that many times the pain the patients endure is not only physical, but also spiritual. Whenever a schoolgirl seeks lessons from me and asks about my success experience, I always tell them tirelessly, the best inspiration is often hidden in the most ordinary life, but please remember to observe that life is not only about looking with your eyes, but also about feeling it with your heart, understanding the pain of patients, and listening to their voices. This is the most precious wealth of our doctors. At the same time, I will also specifically remind me that every female patient loves others first, which is an eternal truth. In this society, women are often prone to giving everything for their family and lovers, but ignore their physical and mental health. But the value of a woman is never defined by whether she can have children or whether she can take care of her husband and children. Our value lies in bravely pursuing her dreams and realizing the infinite possibilities of life. Today, as a gynecologist, I am more convinced that my mission is more than just curing diseases. The full text is over.